guys, you're back. So here's me again. You're here with Courtland Blade, aka the Professor. So we have our assistant, Anaya. She's here. Say hi, Anaya.
Hi.
Where's he out? Sit down. So there are a few things. Remember last week we actually stretched our own canvas. So it's here. It's ready to be prepared. So remember last week we didn't have our scissors with us. So we used a knife to cut out the material. So here we're going to use our scissors to do that trim. So there's a couple things we'll need to finish the preparation of this canvas so it's ready for oil on canvas. So again, if you don't use any kind of ground or protection for the surface, the oil will eventually, not just oil, but the turpentine and things like that, will eat through the canvas. It'll take a couple of years, but it will eat through the canvas. So here, you'll need acrylic. Well, you could get other kinds of gesso, but acrylic gesso is a basic type that you typically would use. You use whatever brand that you prefer, but this is what I usually get, basic acrylic gesso. So you can pick it up at any hobby store, Hobby Lobby, Michael's, any of the art supply stores, Dick Blick, any of those, Prism. We also have brushes. So you need brushes. So this is a cheap 3-inch brush that I picked up from a local hardware store. You can easily use a brush like this, or you can get a cheaper one. These are like the super cheap ones you can get again at a hobby store or art supply store. So these tend to have parts that kind of fray out. So when you paint with it, you actually will lose one of the hairs. It'll kind of stay on the canvas. So I don't really like gessoing with these, but they are cheap and they're easy to use. But this, we're gonna use a synthetic type this time around. I have not really used these, but this is a typical regular paint brush. We're gonna use that this time around. So, but first, we're gonna clean those trims. Remember that trim here, all that extra? So we're gonna try to make that a little bit neater. So got some nice scissors here. So we're just gonna take that and just cut along the trim. Come around this side, you can probably see a little better. Yeah, you can see a little excess. Just take a little excess off. There we go. It cuts so easily compared to that knife we used last week, the cheese knife. Yeah, it doesn't have to be absolutely all the way to the wood, but if you prefer to have that excess cut off, you can do that. But it really doesn't matter, because again, it's the back of the canvas. The painting on the front is what matters. Most of the time for a smaller edge canvas like this, typically you would frame the piece, unless you're using a gallery wrap, deep edge canvas, but this is not deep. This is relatively shallow. So we're not gonna, like when I finish this work, I'll probably frame it. Let me give you an example. So if you come with me, over here, this is a painting that I recently completed. This is the same type of canvas that we just stretched, but here we use a floater frame, so it gives it that kind of more of a substance. So there's more of an object versus a thinner canvas. Right, so let's go back here. So I'm pretty comfortable with how the back is right now. We're going to go into actually applying our gesso. So typically you would have multiple layers. When I was trained in preparing a canvas, we use 3 layers. Oh, also, can you bring that back there? There are a couple other things you'll need. So again, gesso, brush, but also we have sandpaper. Some people like texture on their surface. Other people like smooth canvas to work on, almost like a board again. And again, this is relatively, I mean, it's not super tight, but when this dries on it, it's gonna be tight. It's gonna have tension. So you need 3 different types for the smoothest surface you want. So after we get these 3 layers on, we're gonna have a rough surface. So this is sandpaper that is 100 P100. Then we have, so that's the roughest. Then we have a mid-grade one, that's P150. So that will go after the rougher surface. Then we have a finer one, being P220, being a lot finer surface, and you just smooth surface that you want, if you like to work on a smooth, very smooth surface. All right, so here, we're gonna use what we have, the knife. So you're gonna watch here with us and learn. So you put the little fingers down, come on. So come this way. I'm gonna let you paint a little bit. So come on this side now. Alright, so here, you can apply this directly to the surface. I haven't used this bottle for a little while. I had a bigger gesso here, so you just squeeze it down there. Again, this is our first layer. So I'm probably gonna have to pick up some more gesso for our final layers. We're gonna finish this tube up and apply it. You also get buckets of this stuff. I mean, this is the smallest tube you can get essentially. So we have our brush. We're gonna use this more synthetic type brush right now. So you just brush it on. You try to get it in the fibers. Again, this is our first layer that we're applying right now. So if you want to paint your edges, you also can do that, but typically you'll paint the front surface first. This is gesso, so it does dry relatively rapidly. So we're just going to do these cross-hatching patterns. If you're a drafts person, you like drawing, you definitely know what cross-hatching is. So you'll kind of crisscross your patterns to get it deeper into the surface. Go. So we're here. We've almost had half the canvas already covered for this first layer of gesso. Okay, it's cross-hatching patterns. And you'll just do this with the entire surface. And then when we complete that first layer, it'll probably take about 15 minutes or so to dry. Fingers. Alright, so here we have our first layer. We were kind of sparse on our gesso, so I will be using another bottle of gesso for the last two layers. This first layer, I did not gesso the edges. You can gesso the edges, but you don't have to gesso the edges. I probably won't gesso the edges on this one because I do know that I will be framing this painting when it is done. So we'll actually, every time you gesso, you're going to have to wait 15-20 minutes for that layer to dry. But because of the fact that it dries so fast, we're going to have to clean the brush. So take a walk with me, we'll walk to the sink. Just go this way. This hall, so the Harrison Center has a lot of artists in it, so we have a lot of works on the wall. We have this communal sink, that works perfect for washing paintbrushes. So here, it's very simple. Gesso is a water-based medium, so it rinses right out. You choose water. Just from what? Yeah, it rinses right out. Very simple, just like house paint, anything like that. There you go. So we're probably going to run by the store and grab a bottle of gesso. And I have ran out. You saw we got down to the bottom of the bottle. We got everything out. So we're going to get a nice bottle to finish the last layers up. And I'll show you the last process of sanding and finishing the surface of the canvas. All right, so let's go to the store. Get our goods. So we're going to finish our canvas. All right, so let's get started. All right, so we have some more gesso. So it's the same kind. I got the exact same type that I got last time. I didn't want to spend too much because I was just using it for this canvas, maybe one or two more. But here, we get to use a good, healthy amount for our next layer. So this is clearly dry. We've been gone for a few minutes and it is completely dry. So we're going to start and apply our second layer. We'll let that dry, then our third layer. Remember, after every layer that you apply, you need to clean your brush out so it does not dry and get kind of stiff and you know, really crusty and hard to work with from paint drying in the bristles. You might let I put a little paint on this one. So I'll start it, and then we'll let Anaya put a little paint on this one. So squeeze iron, just like mustard. Right? Just like mustard on a hot dog. Yeah. With our pastry. So here, again, we apply this kind of cross-hatching technique, and you see how thick it is? It could be thick, it could be kind of lumpy, because again, we're going to sand this down. But here we have this healthy amount. You see how it's not really absorbing in the surface like it was before. This is because the surface has a layer that will be protected. It's in the threads of the canvas. Now if we come on this side, so now I have started actually applying to that side edge. I know I initially was not going to do that, but I kind of did it automatically out of habit. So we are going to cover the edges here. So you just go along the edges there. So you see here I'm getting some paint on the floor. So if you are working on a surface that you don't want to get dirty, you need to use newspaper or put it on a surface you don't really care if it gets painty or not. My studio floor, it's very accustomed to paint and it doesn't mind. Alright, so now you want to do something?
Yes, sir.
Now let's see Anaya use some. So I put a lot of gesso on this layer. This is almost excessive, more than you really need for this layer. But we will wait for it to dry completely. Once we cover it with this layer, then we might not have to do the third layer since it's so thick. But we will check and see when we get back to that, and then we'll sand it down using these 3 different layers of sandpaper. So here, let's see how you work. So cross-hatching technique. Not like that. Remember, you're painting. You can hold it like this so you can move your wrist. Give you one try. Move along. Here. Two more at angles. Alright, so sometimes it takes some time to learn how to move your wrist in a fluid way. Here Anaya is learning. She's learning. Alright, think of that. So here she has kind of clumps. So we want to kind of smooth that out. Again, it's not going to be perfectly smooth because we are using a healthy amount of gesso here. But again, it doesn't have to be perfectly smooth, and it doesn't need to be perfectly smooth because we're going to sand it. But we do want that protection. And if you do want textured surface, this is an excellent way to do that. So you can paint, so if you look at an angle here, can you see those lines there? You can leave those lumps there if you wanted to and have your textured surface. So when you paint, you actually have this active, lumpy surface that adds this kind of activation to the piece. And again, we're going to cover this edge here. We're going to do this on all 4 sides. And again, you can do this neater, but since I'm working in an area, and I can just do so paint on you. Since I'm working in an area that isn't really sensitive, that could be painted on, I can just kind of smush it all over the place. Alright, so there we have our second layer. You just repeat that process after it dries with the third layer. Next, we will be, after this dries, when we do our last layer, we'll go into actually sanding the surface. Now I'll show you how to do that with these 3 different layers. So go wash your brush out. You don't want it drying like this. And then go ahead and then get your sandpaper and prepare so we can finish that surface. But it will take some time for us to dry. Since we apply so much, it may take a bit longer to actually dry all the way through. So I'll see you in a bit. I'll see you in a few minutes. It'll be a couple of seconds. Alright, so here we have our final, we put our final layer on. So if you look close, you see this kind of, these ripples in the surface, a harder surface, the uneven surface there. So if you look. So we're gonna smooth that down. So again, we'll start with more coarse sandpaper. This is P100. That's what you'll start with first. You just tear it. You'll start with a little section. You can fold it, easier to work with. Or you can place your fingers on it. You start there. You're going to start with circular motions. Now if you have a little sander, that works as well. Just don't be too hard on it. Circular motion. There's a lot of coarse wear, coarse off. Again, this is all to your preference. So some people like texture, some people don't want any texture at all. So each layer, again, you start more coarse, then you go finer and finer and finer. Just like us from the gesso. Just getting onto it pretty good. So look at my thumb there. You see that? All that is from that layer of gesso that we just smoothed out there. So it's a lot smoother. Touch that. See that? It's not perfectly smooth yet, but it's a lot smoother, right? So this work was there. Then to make it thinner. So here we have a bunch left. We use this on our next canvas. So our next layer that we're going to go to will be P150. So 150. So we go from 100 to 150. So 150 is finer. The bigger the number is, the more fine the sandpaper is. So here, again, we'll do that point, that surface where we can press our fingers and get those nice circles going. So however way is more comfortable for you to hold. Just got a surface. So again, we have another layer done. It's not perfectly flat in some areas, but mostly it's very smooth. So touch me in this area. You feel that? It's very smooth, almost like when you sand wood. You'll feel the difference. Yeah, right here. Then the finest that we're gonna go down to for this specific canvas is P220. You really don't need to go finer than that. So again, I'm gonna tear a piece off. and fit the size that I need for the surface that I want to achieve. Right here, I have a finished surface. I have a surface that I want. So if you look here, you can still see some of the strokes here. Now, if I wanted to get rid of these strokes, I'd have to use the more rough surface, the first sandpaper for a longer time to knock these out and go smooth it down. But this is a surface that I like for this specific canvas. So you rub it, even though you can see some of the strokes, it's still very smooth when you rub it. And this will allow the oil to sit on the surface more so versus having it kind of absorb. So this is a good layer, good surface. All right, so we are done with prepping the surface for today. Next week, we'll be looking at how to do a under sketch or a under painting. I prefer under sketches, so the first technique that I will show you is under sketch, and then how to put a wash on and build your layers from there. Often there's people who like under paintings. When I learned traditionally, I also did under paintings, but I prefer under sketches now that I've worked for over a decade or so as an artist. Remember, like the page. Let me know if you have any preferences or thoughts about the methods I'm using. Use that in the comments. But again, like me here. Also, you like me on Facebook, and don't forget to check out my my website at www.courtlandblade.com. Again, www.courtlandblade.com. Thanks. I'll see you next week.